We are a website for basically whistleblowers. We decided to make ourselves available to get the truth out and to interview whistleblowers from Black projects, military, all kinds of individuals who had worked on Black projects for the government, for the secret government. And on top of that, researchers who were investigating, finding out the truth behind the matrix, what's really going on, and also experiencers. And we create video interviews for those who are not familiar and so on. So these are some of our witnesses. We've gone all over the world at this point. When this demo was made, that was actually at the very beginning of Camelot, and we've now been in operation for over 4 years doing this same thing. So we have actually a huge video library at this point of interviews. People waste whole weekends watching our stuff, or spend good time, depending on how you want to look at it. And so what I have to say is that I've come to a place where I'm beginning to get a vision of what the big picture is really all about. And some of this information I'm going to talk to you about tonight is not even on Camelot yet, simply because I don't know if it's because I went to Adam's calendar, as Michael would say, and was sort of in these incredibly energetic stones or what, but I'm starting to get downloads of information as well. And so call it what you will, that's what's happening. And I am getting some very interesting information that's allowing me to connect the dots. So that's going to flow into what I'm going to tell you, as well as the whistleblower testimony we've been getting for the last 4 years. So some of the questions you need to ask yourself, and very few people actually spend the time to actually do that, is to say, what is the plot? If this were a movie, as your lives play out, then we want to know, what is the plot? That means, where are we headed, what's at stake, and these kinds of issues. And what you find out if you go down the rabbit hole deep enough, take the red pill, call it what you will, and find out what's going on beneath the matrix, you find out there is a battle for planet Earth. And there's also a battle for the future of humanity. And we are absolutely on, on the dissection table, so to speak, literally and metaphorically. So there's a lot of things that I can talk about here and that we're going to go through. I can talk to you about the psychology of whistleblowers. It's important to understand that our information is all witness-based. Regardless of whether we're talking about researchers or experiencers, all the people we talk to, people from Black projects, are coming to us, and we call them, in general, whistleblowers, because what they're blowing the whistle on is the matrix, the nature of the matrix in your lives. And so it's that process that we have a lot of experience with at this time. And what happens is that whistleblowers blow hot and cold. They get frightened. They get threatened. I'm not going to mince words here. We've been threatened, okay? And we have recent evidence that we were also supposed to be bumped off at various junctures. Hasn't happened. Some wonderful people have intervened on our behalf, behind the scenes, and so on and so forth. There are white hats in the government, in the secret government. There are people working in military, in all aspects of this puzzle. And they're working in the inside, and in some cases they're doing some very good work, and they will do it undercover, and you will never know who they are, but they may be saving your ass. And so in many ways we do thank them, and we honor them at Project Camelot. We have had one whistleblower that died mysteriously. Our Mr. X, one of the first whistleblowers we ever interviewed, died of a heart attack suddenly. He was taken ill 3 o'clock in the morning, right after Christmas shopping. By 12 noon the next day he was dead. He left a wife, a beautiful wife, and lovely newborn child behind. He was a delightful man, and we'd spent hours with him and his wife. And he is missed, and he is honored because he was brave enough to come forward after over 25 years of honoring his non-disclosure agreement and telling us the truth about his experiences. that interview is one of the very first interviews we ever did as Project Camelot. And that is on our website, and I encourage you to listen to it and watch it. Okay, a little bit about our interviews for those that don't know. We do what is called more of a guerrilla filmmaking style. So we don't stand on ceremony, and we're not real concerned with things like professional lighting, sound, etc. When we got together, which is over 4 years ago, we basically found out what happened was I had already picked up a consumer-grade camcorder and started going around to various conferences, and UFO conferences. I thought it would just be a lark, and I would interview some speakers about their experiences with UFOs. And previous to that, I have a BA in English, a degree. I have worked advanced degree work in sociology and also executive MBA work as well. And also I have studied acting, and so I have years of training in all different aspects of sort of life, I guess you might call it. In addition, I started out when I was a very, very young person. I was very interested in the esoteric, so I studied the occult in depth, so I can tell you what the Illuminati philosophy is, why they believe it, and what their line of reasoning is, and why they're doing what they're doing to humans on planet Earth at this time. On top of that, I was very interested in Eastern philosophy, so I studied that in depth. And then I met Bill Ryan. He was one of my interviewees, and he was a webmaster and a writer, and he was in his free time constructed a website for something called Project Serpo, and that's on the internet at this time if you're interested in seeing that. So what happened was I interviewed him. He came across in the interview very well. I was not actually interested in interviewing him all that much. I just did it because he was the only spokesperson out there talking about Project Serpo, and he was the webmaster. I couldn't get an interview with the people who released that information, which contains tons of disinfo, but there are some seeds of truth there about an alien-human exchange program that took place in the 60s. There have been several, maybe hundreds of those types of exchange programs that went on. And we have evidence of that from our whistleblowers. But what happened was I did the interview with Bill, and he came across very well, asked him some very hard-hitting questions. I tend to have a hard-hitting interview style that is fairly controversial on the net. And if you do go to YouTube and read some of the comments, you'll see they go all over the map. And I am not naive on that road in regard to that. However, I do want to say there's a method to my madness. When I interview somebody, especially somebody who is particularly programmed, and I have to say that everyone is programmed. Everyone who's lived in the Matrix up until a certain point, even when you come in fresh, even as an indigo, there's a certain amount of programming that takes place. If you take a whistleblower, especially somebody who's been in black projects and comes to us and wants to tell us the truth about something, one of the first things that goes on is they are going to have a lot of blocks that are put in place by mind control to get them to go off point. And this is happening every day and to you all the time. And the television, and I don't think I have to go into too much detail here in Sedona. I think people in Sedona are extremely aware, and even if you didn't know Project Camelot's work, you certainly know what mind control is all about. But we are being basically bombarded with scalar weaponry of all kinds. The thing is that some of us are lucky enough to also be able to get our vibrational frequency to a place where we are not affected by the same things that other people are. So to get back to my interviewing style, I have the ability to sort of avoid, knock on wood, the vibrational frequencies they've been trying to send at us for the last 4 years, which has been pretty heavy duty, I have to say. And at the same time, I'm aware of it when it is happening to some degree. And I certainly know when I'm getting a witness who is reaching a block, who's being sidelined, who's being thrown off track, and so on and so forth. And So if you're smart and you watch our interviews and you watch them carefully, you will see the body language matters. And that's why I have a camera, and that's why we're cutting between me and the interviewee, or Bill and the interviewee, and you see facial expressions, body language, etc., because that will all give you clues as to whether they're telling the truth to any particular question. And what I do is, in that style, I interrupt them. So I will throw them off by asking them a question when they least expect it, because I know that they're suddenly going down a road in which it's kind of like when you plow corn or whatever, you've got a deep furrow there, and once they start going down the road, they just go nonstop. In their mind, you'll see them talk very fast or continue to go in a very sort of monotonous tone. And what happens is they're no longer thinking. Their thinking apparatus is no longer connected with what they're actually saying. And I'm a sensitive and intuitive, and I have an ability to tap into that. So consequently, I have gotten some of the best testimony from whistleblowers that's out there. And one of the people that will attest to that is Robert Dean, who is a very well-known whistleblower and has been interviewed all over the place and had been for years before he and I ever met. Camelot being relatively new on the scene, considering we're only 4 years old. And I got him to break down into tears, to say things he'd never said before on camera. And I still do that to this day with him and some others. So it's not an excuse for being rude, although I'm sure some people may consider it that. It is a method, and I come from a very strong training in acting and sort of an interactive, very dramatic background. And so I also can use that to my advantage when I'm interviewing a witness. So, okay, just to move on a little further. What I figured out is going on here is that on top of all the secrecy and all the misdirects that are out there, the game being played here is all about creating humanity 2.0. And that there's two major paths that we're going down. One involves angelic humans, going back to the true lineage of humanity. And the other involves what I'm calling, and I'm coining this word, robotic Superman. And we have evidence that there is definitely a Superman being created by the powers that be, and that's what they're interested in doing. They are very interested in going off planet, terraforming other planets, having complete power and dominion over the Earth and over you, and also over the genetic engineering and the development of humanity going into the future. And the way they want to do that is using technology. And that's what divides them from the more spiritual approach that has to do with you creating your own being, evolving at your own pace, and also uplifting your own DNA and activating your own dumbed down strands of DNA and becoming the superhuman that you are capable of being. Now, the Illuminati is aware that you have this capacity, this capability, that you have the power to change your being, because you're all spirits having a physical experience here. So the trouble with the way they think is that they're interested in power over others, and they're interested in control, and they also want to speed up your evolution. So they want to get there faster, because they also know that we have various ET races and ultra-dimensionals, metadimensionals, whatever you want to call them, coming to this planet, observing this planet, interested in this planet, interested in this human experiment, and they want control over that, okay? And what they've decided is that most of you are too dumb and too slow for them to waste their time on. So they have a huge program that's completely secret, in which they monitor your children the minute they're born. They figure out which ones have the best capacity mentally, etc., and then they watch them and they track their development. And some of them they bring in and they recruit at young ages into black projects, and they never see the light of day beyond that. Some of them are being transferred off planet. You've got missing kids. We have huge numbers of missing children, as many of you know. Some of them are used in ritual sacrifice by the Illuminati, and there are blood rituals and so on, and you know, it's a very dark side of the equation. There are also reptilian and other ETs that are service to self, that are manipulating the Illuminati, and individuals could be right here in this audience. So it's a very complex game. It's going to sound pretty outlandish if you've never considered it. On the other hand, if you have, then what I'm going to do is focus your mind on what the real game is and the end result that they're looking for is all about. Because when we started out on Project Camelot, it was like following a very winding trail. And what we began to get information about, coming back to us, was about robots, armies of robots. And we were told, for example, by Dr. Peterson, that if I even came out here and told you about armies of robots, that I would be killed. So I did anyway, and I'm still here. Now, I firmly believe that I have some very heavy-duty protection out there that's ET and angelic and so on. And you know, so we're still here. This information is now out there. Millions of people are aware, becoming awakened, and we're not the only ones doing this kind of work. So, what you have to consider is, once you acknowledge that we're not alone, and as Bob Dean says, we've never been alone, then you have to decide whether or not there are positive ETs, negative ETs, extra-dimensionals, meta-dimensionals, what their objectives are. And the fact of the matter is they're not all well-intentioned. Now, if you want to take a really long view of positive and negative polarity, you may say that even reptilians who are service to self and are interested in basically, I guess, dominion or dominating you and possibly using you as food or your energy as food and so on, are just living the best way they can to survive. That unfortunately, humans, according to some of our witnesses, and quite a few of them agree on these points that I bring to you today, know that your emotionality is being fed on in the fourth dimension by greys and ETs, greys and reptilians. That they use that emotionality, okay? They feed off it. Even your sexuality, your sexual energy, they feed off that. So what happens is you need to get smart, and you need to get smart now. The trouble is that there are a lot of New Agers out there that want you to believe that all ETs are friendly, that all ETs have your best interests in mind. That is not the case. We have lots and lots of evidence to the contrary. But these are some of the main things that they're doing in order to sort of facilitate what they want. And in some cases, it is not with our best interests in mind. So, if you're looking at what the Illuminati want, you have to understand that they are putting the word out there. In other words, they love to tell you what they're about to do to your face. They'll put it into television shows, they'll put it into advertisements, they'll cloak it in various news broadcasts, so on and so forth. And they figure if you can't catch on, that you're too dumb to, and therefore you don't have the right to survive. It's really survival of the fittest, but it's in a spiritual paradigm. So you must understand that the Illuminati have studied the occult, and that's how they rule the world. They use those basic precepts that are not good or bad, but they use them as magicians to have control of the way you live and what happens here on earth. And so it behooves you to find out how these people think and to understand these principles, because they're very basic principles and they can be used for good as well as evil. And so these are some of their sort of, it's their edge. Their edge is that they made pacts. There's documented evidence from various whistleblowers, long before Camelot ever hit the scene, by the way, that the government made pacts with certain groups of ETs, and unfortunately they were not positive ETs for the most part. They were groups that made pacts with the Vatican, with presidents, certainly of the United States, and so on. And the United States is, in many ways, sort of like on the fulcrum of the whole scenario, because the United States had military and technological superiority at an early stage, partly because they imported it from Germany right after the war, and that was through a program called Paperclip. Those Nazis are still in power. They're in power here in a very hidden way here in the United States and in Germany and some places elsewhere. Possibly, you could say, in and around the whole world. Okay. There's also an effort to make various hybrid races. One thing you have to understand is that genetic engineering is being done by all different kinds of races. That what's called human is a genetic library. You are all ETs. You are all metadimensionals. Each one of you are a different combination of those different races. Some of you do not contain DNA from other races. And that's where you get, wars and all this kind of nonsense where people will feed into that because they actually you will recognize a enemy who you had in other solar systems, etc. And it's in your DNA, it's in your makeup, because you are, as I say, a composite. You are a melting pot of races. And the ETs know this. That's why they're watching us so carefully. They see their own genetic offspring at stake here. And they want supremacy of their particular offspring over other particular offspring. So there's a complex war with ETs, if it was a football game or whatever, there'd be lots of teams, and they're all sort of going at it. But there are some teams that have supremacy, if you want, on this 3D reality over others. And certainly the reptilians are one of them. And they are interdimensionals, but they are also inhabiting, from what I understand, mostly the fourth dimension, that they can materialize here, and they are under the ground in planet Earth. The Dracos, and they have made deals with the Vatican, for one thing. And again, we get this from witness, this is not coming from off the top of my head, it comes from witness testimony. And you could say, well, so what? These are just word of mouth. The trouble is that when you get a lot of witnesses and you investigate their background and you know where they come from is all correct, and you also get a lot of corroboration on certain points from all the different expert witnesses that we do talk to, and you're talking to people that are channeling, and channeling has its own problems, or getting downloads, etc. In other words, you start to form a picture, and that's what Project Camelot, that's what our website is all about. What we do is we put the testimony out there, we put all the different, some testimony not agreeing with other testimony, and then we basically ask you to be the decider. You decide what matters to you, what resonates, and what does not. We're not going to tell you what exactly to believe. That's not our job, and never will be our job, and we're not interested in doing that. But what we will do is things like I'm doing today, which is I'll give you a chance to see how we're beginning to draw the conclusions and connect the dots, and then you can continue to research and come to your own conclusions and see what resonates. Okay, so there is a war for stargates going on behind the scenes, and there are wars going on behind the scenes. And I can tell you that we have so many witnesses talking about this aspect of things that it can't be ignored. And I can also tell you that one man who was killed that I met with personally, who never got to become a real official Camelot witness, told me that he set up a camera on his deck and he just let it run in Los Angeles, actually. And he got so much film of ships shooting at each other and UFOs, etc. it was just incredible. And this man was tracked down, he was haunted, he was rear-ended, he had all kinds of issues happen to him, and ultimately they did kill him. And they silenced him completely. Okay. So, stargates are an absolute key element to the big picture that's going on here on the planet right now, and to 2012 and beyond, to what's going to be happening, why it's so crucial at this juncture. This program has been going on for many, many, many years on this planet. It didn't just start when the so-called aliens arrived in Roswell. It started way before that. In fact, it started back with the Anunnaki, and that's why Michael's work and our work actually dovetails, because the evidence we're getting is, number one, that the Anunnaki are still here, that they never left, so that factions from the Anunnaki who are at war with each other, and were at war with each other way back when, Enlil and Enki, it's all in the Zechariah Sitchin material, is correct, and what's in the Sumerian tablets is actually authentic history for the most part, and then it builds from there. But there is also a history before that point, and that's what can boggle the mind of any researcher, because we're really talking about a puzzle and a history of humanity being seeded to this planet, being killed off, being reseeded, killed off by different cataclysms, etc. And at this point, you have some relationship vaguely to what I would say were maybe the version of humanity that was here back at the time that Michael's talking about, which I believe he actually says it nowadays is something like 300,000 years ago. But for all intents and purposes, because of all the other ET races that have been here, genetically manipulating you behind the scenes, and they actually do it now as well. They're doing it, positive abductions are happening. In other words, you can get upgrades by certain groups. I've gotten them, okay? And I know they exist. So what I have to say is that this genetic manipulation is a huge game, and it's being played, and so you are not the same version of human that was back then. You are much huger of a library, if you will, of a group of genes and DNA and so on. And so the move at this point is also because we're entering a time when the planet is going to go through a place in the solar system where we are having heavy energy bombard this planet. There is a wave. It's been called a wave of energy coming towards us. We're also moving into the galactic center simultaneously. There is a planet which is probably a brown dwarf, which is our second sun coming into the solar system. So there's a bunch of things going on. Our sun is going through some heavy-duty changes, in part because of all this that I'm talking about. And what I mean when I say there's a wave coming towards us, we have a whistleblower, Jake Simpson, who talked about the fact that we have craft that are superluminal, that can go beyond our solar system, have gone out beyond our solar system, and according to him, have seen this wave of energy, have been able to tap into this wave of energy that is headed our way towards our solar system. So we are already feeling the effects, as David Wilcox said in the presentation, the short movie that you saw. All the planets are feeling the effects of this. And so the Illuminati know this game. The stakes are getting higher. All the ETs know the stakes are going higher. So we're at a juncture now on the planet where you have a choice in how you want to go through this time. You have the power. It's just that most people do not realize they have it. And they also have not gotten themselves into the place where they understand how to change and uplift their own vibration and move into the next frequency level. And that's going to be crucial. It's crucial now because you want to avoid the scalar weaponry that's being sent at the drone, the humans that are just, going to work and coming home and drinking beer and watching TV and, not really thinking about anything. But you can do that already, possibly, but you need to go beyond that, because it's going to have to do with whether you can enter a stargate and go through what's called ascension, whether you can move on to the next level of Earth, because Earth herself is going through this transition. We are becoming lighter. We are moving into a different frequency, the entire solar system and our Earth, but especially our Earth. And all the time, there is a war going on. And all the time, there is evidence, documented evidence that's so thick of a plan by the Illuminati to eliminate close to, I believe, 2/3 of the population. It's carved into the Georgia Guidestones, and you can go down and read it. It's put into what's called the Iron Mountain Report. And so I'm just kind of going through the slides, but I think that I have a sort of a limited amount of time. I do want to be able to let you ask questions at the end. So I apologize for going rather quickly through this material. If you like what you hear, if you want to hear more, if you want to see my presentation, just send me an email and we can email it to you. We can also make it available along with this video. We are shooting this video right now and hoping to post this onto our website so that this information will get out there that way as well. So there's evidence, again, that there is a race of robots that are clones. They look human. So when I say robots, don't be thinking that we're talking about something that's so obvious you're going to know it's a robot. No, they look human. Dr. Pete Peterson was very heavily involved in this program, and you know, in many ways I could get killed for just saying that. We owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Peterson, so you know, I do want to say that right at the outset here, but he's a very brilliant man. He was briefly a whistleblower with us, and he has been silenced, so he no longer will talk to us. But that happens. Henry Deacon has also gone black, meaning he's more or less silenced, of his own choice, supposedly, although we believe he was also threatened. So, our heritage, or the heritage of humanity, is angelic. In other words, we come from Source. We will go back to Source. It's our choice. You can create your own way of doing that. You are doing that now. We are co-creators of this reality. You buy into certain things because of certain proclivities you have. You can get out of those sort of whirlpools that are keeping you entangled. And this is all by intention and action. Meditation is a huge part of that, and you can't avoid that. We are all time travelers. You are multidimensional beings. You inhabit many different realities simultaneously, and you're doing it right now. So your attention is flickering very quickly. You're here for a fraction of a moment, and you're somewhere else. You're here for a fraction of a moment, and you're somewhere else. That's your composite reality of this time, this place, of this body that you're inhabiting. But in fact, your consciousness is much larger than that. So just to sum up the playing field, we're really talking about two major groups. And within those groups, of course, there is a fighting for power, especially when you talk about the service to self group. The service to others is simply when you sort of cross that line, and it's more important to serve others than the self. And you know, the degrees to which you get involved in that vary and will grow with time. So there are solutions to dealing with the situation on planet Earth at this time. It all involves consciousness. Consciousness is king. Again, the powers that be know that. They know your consciousness is king. They know if you don't buy into something en masse, that it's not going to happen. So they are going to convince you of certain things, and they want things like Armageddon big time. That's what religion is all about. Religion is very much an Illuminati prison for the mind. And therefore, that doesn't mean there isn't truth in religions. So you can learn a great deal from various religions. They had good intentions sometimes in some of that information. But it's all gotten so distorted at this point that most of it is highly suspect or been twisted in one way or another. So again, you can do things like reach enlightenment by triggering your own kundalini, by also, meditating, by attaining all knowledge. By another really important thing to do is to find those like-minded people who are on the same path, who you can connect with energetically, because that will make you more powerful. Illuminati also know that. So divide and conquer is a huge strategy here on planet Earth. They know you're vulnerable because of your emotional nature. That doesn't make emotions bad. So the ETs that are trying to cleanse you of having no emotions, that's actually a plot. They know that your emotional nature, your emotional intelligence is one of the best antennas you have that can save your life, tell you what's good for your body, tell you how to survive, and it's when you deny those emotions that you get sick. It's not when you allow them. Now, how you allow them, where you go with them, that's another side of the story. But be aware, your emotional nature is one of the key elements that makes humanity stronger than many of the ET races that are coming here with all incredible intellects. Because you have something called emotional heart intelligence that puts you arms and legs and, huge leaps and bounds up and above many of the ET races who seem smarter. Okay? You can outsmart many of the lower level ETs simply because of your ability to use that emotional resonance within you. They know this, okay? But a lot of people don't trust themselves. They don't trust their intuition. They've been dumbed down. They've been told not to believe that side of themselves. What I would suggest is open up that side of yourself as much as possible. Trust your instincts. Go with something that you have a hunch about. Try it out and test it constantly. Become like a scientist in your own consciousness. Step back, do experiments, watch and see what happens. When you have an intuition, follow it out. See if it plays out. Keep notes. Eventually, what you will find, if you are anything like me, is that it starts to happen exactly as you thought it would. You start to see the future. You start to connect with what is going to happen next. And you start to really get the best things for yourself and others by following out that path. So I highly recommend it. You need to stand in your light. You need to become light warriors. It's more important now than it ever has been on the face of this planet that you do that. So as Project Camelot, we go down some pretty dark roads, and these are some of the miscellaneous operations of the powers that be that they've got going on at this time. If you want to know more about it, watch our videos. Start really listening to our witnesses. I can't stress that enough. I have to say that people will tell you, even a whistleblower like Henry Deacon will tell you disinfo from time to time. Every single person will tell you disinfo from time to time. But the information that you get, that you can start cross-correlating with your own experience and with the experience you're hearing from other people, is going to give you a path that you can start to see what's really going on out there. And then that allows you to be a free enough human to decide your own destiny. And that's what it's really all about. So we have alternative futures here on Earth that we are basically looking at, and this is unequivocal. This is going to happen whether you kind of believe in it or you don't believe in it. Your higher self knows that this is the game at stake here. Whether this person sitting here at this time or listening to this on a video is conscious of this or not is another question. It's still a co-creativity event because you as a spirit were in command and decided to enter the game at this place and this time. Okay, we've covered most of this. Okay, let me talk a little bit about channeling. Many of our, if not all of our whistleblowers, even military, people from the military black projects, you think scientists and engineers and people that have degrees, incredible degrees and so on and so forth, aren't interested in channeling or aren't interested in tapping into the spiritual beyond. Not true. All of those people, and many of them were selected to be scientists in black projects specifically because they have a proclivity to be an intuitive already. So they're not only scientists, but they're intuitives. The ones working for black projects. They were selected because they have those extra abilities that they came in with. So what you have to understand is that some of those people are getting information. Once you have an intuitive openness, you will get information. What Pete Peterson calls the information field, what they called in the 1900s was the ether. This thing that connects you and I, this thing we call empty space is not empty. It is a field, and there's lots of books out there about that and a lot of new agey talk about it, but it is real, it is tangible, and we are receivers, and we can also project, we can also send out. So we're senders and receivers, but we get information. Now how do you get it? The kind of sovereignty you have around your own body and soul and energy is where the difference happens, okay? So you can have somebody who will let the energy in, who is not discerning, who is too young, who are inexperienced, who doesn't know what they're really getting. They can be a filter that's, it's like a dirty bottle or whatever, that the information comes in, they send it out, it's distorted and bent. So lots of humans are like that, and lots of channelers are like that, and they just can't get around it. They don't have the spiritual strength to withstand the energies coming at them. They may have the openness, they haven't developed the spiritual muscles to deal with the kind of superior intelligences and energy that's coming at them, and so they blow it. They either self-destruct, they go down a dark road, they get taken over, etc. And this happens constantly. So there's a huge cautionary note on the people that they're channeling out there, because a lot of them are allowing their entire bodies to be taken over, and yet they're not sophisticated spiritually enough or strong enough to withstand that force. Now, there are some channelers that do allow that to happen, that maintain their self-integrity, okay? So I'm not saying that happens with all channelers, but actually most would probably be too weak to withstand what's going on. So that's where channelers become suspect. And so at this time of planet Earth, we humans are basically breaking through the veil. We're starting to become more and more psychic. We're starting to recognize and be self-conscious and self-aware enough to know that we're telepathic and when we're telepathic. You know, even the most average person out there at times will, know when their mother or father is going to call and so and so. This is all just a display of the openness and the ability to see beyond the veil. We all have these powers. We all have special gifts. And it's just a matter of finding your ways of unlocking those keys that are within to access those powers. And more people are starting to do that. More and more children are doing that. More and more children are coming in with that possibility. So as far as whistleblowers, these are just some of the whistleblowers that we have. Many of them are very sophisticated. They have sophisticated degrees. They're highly intelligent. That's one thing that I could say almost across the board. Any whistleblower that we've interacted with and had brought on to Project Camelot ends up to be definitely of higher intelligence than most average people that you would meet, even credentialed people that you would meet. So let me see, where we're at 5 to 10. Dan Mirish is pretty well known, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I do have information about one of the advantages that the Illuminati have is access to future, being able to see the future using what's called the looking glass or a yellow cube. They're two different technologies. And they came from the ETs, and they've been with us for quite some time. There is all kind of drama that goes on with regard to that. Supposedly, according to Dan Urish and Marcia McDowell, that looking glass technology has been shut down because it will affect our time going through this time and space, and that's what he was talking about on this short movie you saw. But unfortunately, we have had a breakdown between Dan Urish and Marcia McDowell that happened over a year ago, I believe, in which we were told in part that we had angered a lot of folks out there, folks in power, by releasing all the truth and by the kinds of interviews we're doing and crossing all the lines and putting the truth out there. And that they basically took and turned everything around and really went after us. For the past a little over a year, they've been really hitting us hard with all kinds of things other than killing us. And so one of the things that did happen was Dan Urish and Marcia McDowell are involved in MJ12, that's the old name for it, it's now called Scion. And they are very involved in all that. We believe that they have been misled at this time, and they are probably monitoring this. We are so surveilled, it's beyond the pale, and I have to say that everyone's surveilled, okay? There is surveillance technology out there, obviously, and this is just known at this point. But you have to understand that it's much far beyond little, mechanical instruments that you can find, for example, in your phone receiver and so on. It's like the technology is light years beyond that. In fact, one of our witnesses talked about the actual state-of-the-art technology that the secret government has now got access to is probably about 10,000 years in advance of what you are experiencing here on planet Earth at this time. So with that in mind, you need to understand what these people are dealing with. Now, that doesn't mean that they can take you over, because again, what you are, and this is why the surveillance is so intense, and why the powers that be want to keep you down so long, and why the Anunnaki, back in the days that Sitchin talks about, actually were responsible for dumbing down some of your DNA. It's not junk DNA. It's real. It's useful, and it should be activated. But what happened is they didn't want you to become their masters, and they were deathly afraid that that would happen if they let you go into your evolution. That would have been a natural progression through the years. So they dumbed us down, and they brought the media and religion and basically put the matrix in place to keep you in that state. And it's really been very successful, I have to say, although there is a huge rebellious element. Now, I have to say that the Illuminati actually like the rebels. And this is a weird love-hate relationship they've got going on with us. Because what a rebel in society indicates is someone that is waking up, someone that is maybe on their level, intellectually, spiritually, etc. Someone who, because it's kind of dark and lonely in that place that they are at. And what humans are, and I don't care whether you call yourself Illuminati or you call yourself, a New Age or whatever the hell, one thing that we have is certain things in common. We don't like to be alone. Sure, we have experts at being alone, and I'm one of them. And, we know how to deal with that world. But ultimately, it becomes very lonely to evolve for centuries by yourself. And this is true of the Anunnaki. And so if you begin to wake up, you actually become a valid competitor in their world. And there are things that they can learn from us, and we can turn the paradigm on its head. And that's within your grasp. And they know that. It's happening now. And I have to say that this animal that they call humanity, this organism, is gone far beyond where they thought they'd be at this time and place on planet Earth. So they have lost control of where this organism is going, and that's because you have decided to grow faster, better, quicker, smarter, whatever you call it. You have basically pushed the bounds of the envelope, and you keep pushing them. And so there's no end to this kind of miraculous progress that can be made by humanity at this juncture, and it is advisable, I have to say. Okay, I'm going to go through these whistleblowers to get to the end. What you can see is, some of our whistleblowers, by the way, have never gone on camera. So like Henry Deacon only came on camera right near the end, and then he went black again. When he went on camera, he actually didn't reveal any of the truths. He told us off camera. By then, he was already too afraid. He did go on stage with me in Barcelona and say he had been on Mars, right after Bob Dean gave a whole presentation on Mars and the bases we had there and so on. That gave him courage. So I joined him on stage to give him moral support at this time. A lot of people didn't understand the way he behaved at that point, but you have to acknowledge that this is a man who is basically hidden and been drugged and mind-controlled and messed with in unimaginable ways. He still found the courage to come, find Camelot, get the truth out, and the amount of truth that we have on our website from Henry Deacon is just amazing. Okay, he's one of the most groundbreaking whistleblowers that have ever come to the fore worldwide, without question. And so I really want to honor him here today. I want to thank him. Humanity owes these people a debt of gratitude for revealing the depths to which the matrix goes. Otherwise, you would stay in the dark. And you must know the negative side so that you can go to the positive side and surmount it. And you can transmute yourself and become a lot more than you are at this very moment. There are things like they're using like epidemics. They will continue to drum these things up. We're just entering late fall now, so I'm sure there'll be some virus going around, whatever. You can protect yourself. There are alternative healing methods out there. I highly suggest that you investigate them. This is Sedona, so I really don't have to go any further into that, I am sure. There are some recent contacts that we have. Ashiana Dean, she used to be called Anna Hayes, has written 2 Voyager books. I highly recommend them if you'd like to find out about the heritage of the human race, what kind of groups of ETs we are a part of. It's a very convoluted story. It's excellently told in the Voyager books. The information there, in my opinion, is some of the best information to ever come out on this planet, bar none. It is controversial, highly controversial. There's some people that don't like it, they don't like her approach, etc. Look, she's human, and there's no one is perfect. Not even an ET is perfect. And so there are different ways of approaching things, different interpretations that can be put on things. But I have to say that if you're interested in where Michael has taken you earlier today, and the history of humanity, how you came to be where you are today, how humanity got to this juncture, and where we might be going. And I mean, I got to tell you that she couldn't make this stuff up. It's really amazing. And a lot of it is substantiated by what we know in Camelot. We have other whistleblowers that have come forward in various ways. Laura Jezik is another one who talks about the reptilians and what's going on there. She has done a great deal of investigation, and she herself is an intuitive. She rubs some people the wrong way because she's extremely, I guess, aggressive in certain ways. But I find her delightful, and I think she's a very, very wise woman. However, I do understand that she also picks her battles out there, and there are some people that take issue with her way of conducting those. So one of the things Anna Hayes did, or Ashiana Dean, was to draw pictures of what she saw, the people that were contacting her, the beings that were contacting her, and she calls them the guardians. She did some drawings here of the various races that comprise the guardians. They are giving her what she considers to be downloads of information. She was part of a program that's quite complex. I have an interview with her that lasts Well, it lasted all day. It's about, what we got on film is about 6 or 8 hours. I can't remember which. Very, very long interview, but it's highly worth watching. And then again, you can also follow it up by reading her books if you want to know more in that regard. There's also the intruder races, what she calls the intruder races, which are the service to self. They are mixtures of various races, and some of them are hybrids, and they're made up, their drawings are here. Okay. So just some basic things, just a quick review are on this slide. I think that we kind of covered all this in general. Ultimately, you have to decide what your role is in this game. And you have to decide how you want to play it, and you need to be conscious about it. The more conscious you are in your own self-development and self-realization, the better off you're going to be. And that means really opening a channel with your higher self and starting to communicate in a fuller way. And the more you communicate, and the more you get in touch with your higher self, the better off you'll be, because your higher self is ultimately angelic, provided you're not a robot. And there are robots and clones. There are lots of clones out there. They look and act human, and they can also go to a doctor, and the doctor would not know unless they did invasive surgery on them in some cases to find out. And that's part of the reason for, they say, the added surveillance at airports. What they're really looking for nowadays at airports, because of the opening of the Gulf of Aden and various other stargates that have opened up, and the wars going on in the stargates, which give different races access to Earth, is they're looking for incoming new kinds of ETs, robotic beings that aren't human anymore, and so on. They want to know who their enemies are. So, that kind of covers it. We have about 20 minutes left, and then you guys are free to leave, or you can leave now. But if you'd like to ask any questions of me or of Michael, feel free. So. Oh, wow. Okay, the oil spill. Okay, I will cover a bit about that, and Michael has gotten some new information just recently about the oil spill, so I certainly would encourage him to share his information. I have to say that I've heard this information. I'm not convinced that it's accurate, but there's a lot more investigation that has to happen for us to know whether it is or not. But it's certainly interesting and thought-provoking. And one of the things about being in Camelot is that, and this is really, really important, is keeping an open mind. I think that you need to consider everything. And when somebody comes up to you and tells you something that you think is absolutely the most absurd thing you've ever heard, I think you need to think again. Because reality is much more bizarre than fiction. It really, truly is. And that's coming from somebody who's been down the rabbit hole quite deeply as a result of being in Project Camelot. So, to answer your question, the Gulf oil. That's a complex situation. On the way to South Africa, I actually was approached by a whistleblower in an airport, and he gave me very good evidence about Gulf oil, the Gulf oil spill. And one of the things he told me was that they'd known for 5 years that those drill sites were not safe places to drill. They knew that they were going to have problems. They are also drilling into volcanic matter down there. Apparently, the latest information we're getting is that they also have discovered ruins of Atlantis. I tapped into that psychically. Also, I'm not going to name them, but certain other whistleblowers that we know and respect have also substantiated that information, and now it is coming out on the net by some various other people that they're apparently trying to cover up some ruins from Atlantis that are down in that area. On top of it, there is an organism down there. There is information about that coming in from one of my whistleblowers, in addition to another person on the web, and I put this other person who is on the web, I don't know their name, who made a video about this organism that has been discovered down there that seems to be growing off the oil. And it is some kind of nanobiological organism that is morphing. That is the information that I had gotten from a whistleblower prior to Michael getting the information he's getting. There is something going on there that is much more complex than what you're being led to believe, that's for sure. And certainly there is huge negligence, there is an intention going on there. The negativities were instrumental in that. There was a push because they are losing ground to move things on, to escalate the population elimination program. People in the Gulf states are dying of car exit poisoning and so on. All this is happening. On ceremony, and we're not real concerned with things like professional lighting, sound, etc. When we got together, which is over 4 years ago, we basically found out what happened was I had already picked up a consumer-grade camcorder and started going around to various conferences, and UFO conferences. I thought it would just be a lark, and I would interview some speakers about their experiences with UFOs. And previous to that, I have a BA in English, a degree. I have worked advanced degree work in sociology and also executive MBA work as well. And also I have studied acting, and so I have years of training in all different aspects of sort of life, I guess you might call it. In addition, I started out when I was a very, very young person. I was very interested in the esoteric, so I studied the occult in depth, so I can tell you what the Illuminati philosophy is, why they believe it, and what their line of reasoning is, and why they're doing what they're doing to humans on planet Earth at this time. On top of that, I was very interested in Eastern philosophy, so I studied that in depth. And then I met Bill Ryan. He was one of my interviewees. And he was a webmaster and a writer, and he was in his free time constructed a website for something called Project Serpo, and that's on the internet at this time if you're interested in seeing that. So what happened was I interviewed him. He came across in the interview very well. I was not actually interested in interviewing him all that much. I just did it because he was the only spokesperson out there talking about Project Serpo, and he was the webmaster. Like whistleblowers blow hot and cold. They get frightened. They get threatened. I'm not going to mince words here. We've been threatened, okay? And we have recent evidence that we were also supposed to be bumped off at various junctures. Hasn't happened. Some wonderful people have intervened on our behalf, behind the scenes, and so on and so forth. There are white hats in the government, in the secret government. There are people working in military, in all aspects of this puzzle. And they're working in the inside, and in some cases they're doing some very good work, and they will do it undercover, and you will never know who they are, but they may be saving your ass. And so in many ways we do thank them, and we honor them at Project Camelot. We have had one whistleblower that died mysteriously. Our Mr. X, one of the first whistleblowers we ever interviewed, died of a heart attack suddenly. He was taken ill 3 o'clock in the morning, right after Christmas shopping. By 12 noon the next day he was dead. He left a wife, a beautiful wife, and lovely newborn child behind. He was a delightful man, and we'd spent hours with him and his wife. And he is missed, and he is honored because he was brave enough to come forward after over 25 years of honoring his non-disclosure agreement and telling us the truth about his experiences. That interview is one of the very first interviews we ever did as Project Camelot, and that is on our website, and I encourage you to listen to it and watch it. Okay, a little bit about our interviews for those that don't know. We do what is called more of a guerrilla filmmaking style, so we don't stand. We are a website for basically whistleblowers. We decided to make ourselves available to get the truth out and to interview whistleblowers from Black projects, military, all kinds of individuals who had worked on Black projects for the government, for the secret government. And on top of that, researchers who were investigating, finding out the truth behind the matrix, what's really going on, and also experiencers. And we create video interviews for those who are not familiar and so on. These are some of our witnesses. We've gone all over the world at this point. When this demo was made, that was actually at the very beginning of Camelot, and we've now been in operation for over 4 years doing this same thing. So we have actually a huge video library at this point of interviews. People waste whole weekends watching our stuff, or spend good time, depending on how you want to look at it. And so what I have to say is that I've come to a place where I'm beginning to get a vision of what the big picture is really all about. And some of this information I'm going to talk to you about tonight is not even on Camelot yet, simply because I don't know if it's because I went to Adam's calendar, as Michael would say, and was sort of in these incredibly energetic stones or what, but I'm starting to get downloads of information as well. And so call it what you will, that's what's happening. And I am getting some very interesting information that's allowing me to connect the dots. So that's going to flow into what I'm going to tell you, as well as the whistleblower testimony we've been getting for the last 4 years. So some of the questions you need to ask yourself, and very few people actually spend the time to actually do that, is to say, what is the plot? If this were a movie, as your lives play out, then we want to know, what is the plot? That means, where are we headed, what's at stake, and these kinds of issues. And what you find out if you go down the rabbit hole deep enough, take the red pill, call it what you will, and find out what's going on beneath the matrix, you find out there is a battle for planet Earth. And there's also a battle for the future of humanity. And we are absolutely on, on the dissection table, so to speak, literally and metaphorically. So there's a lot of things that I can talk about here and that we're going to go through. I can talk to you about the psychology of whistleblowers. It's important to understand that our information is all witness-based. Regardless of whether we're talking about researchers or experiencers, all the people we talk to, people from Black projects, are coming to us, and we call them in general whistleblowers, because what they're blowing the whistle on is the matrix, the nature of the matrix in your lives. And so it's that process that we have a lot of experience with at this time. And what happens is that we couldn't get an interview with the people who released that information, which contains tons of disinfo, but there are some seeds of truth there, about an alien human exchange program that took place in the 60s. There have been several, maybe hundreds of those types of exchange programs that went on. And we have evidence of that from our whistleblowers. But what happened was I did the interview with Bill, and he came across very well, asking some very hard-hitting questions. I tend to have a hard-hitting interview style that is fairly controversial on the net. And if you do go to YouTube and read some of the comments, you'll see they go all over the map. And I am not naive on that road. In regard to that, however, I do want to say there's a method to my madness. when I interview somebody, especially somebody who is particularly programmed, and I have to say that everyone is programmed. Everyone who's lived in the matrix up until a certain point, even when you come in fresh, even as an indigo, there's a certain amount of programming that takes place. If you take a whistleblower, especially somebody who's been in black projects and comes to us and wants to tell us the truth about something, one of the first things that goes on is they are going to have a lot of blocks that are put in place by mind control to get them to go off point. And this is happening every day and to you all the time, and the television, and I don't think I have to go into too much detail here in Sedona. I think people in Sedona are extremely aware, and even if you didn't know Project Camelot's work, you certainly know what mind control is all about. But we are being basically bombarded with scalar weaponry of all kinds. The thing is that some of us